Everyone talks about that one moment in life where your heart stops, not because of love or fear of death, but because something feels so wrong, so out of place, that your brain can't catch up. For me, it wasn't a shadow in the night or a burglar at the window. It was a beige SUV sitting in my garage. I froze in the doorway, my breath caught mid-step, coffee trembling in my hand. The early morning air rolled in like a wave, cool against my face, smelling faintly of wet concrete and the faintest ghost of car exhaust. For a moment, I thought I had lost my mind. Maybe I left the garage open all night. Maybe some neighbor had a medical emergency and needed to pull in. My mind tried to build excuses fast enough to stop my pulse from pounding in my ears. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't an accident. This was someone claiming my space. The SUV was spotless, chunky, almost smug in the way it rested on the left side of my two-car garage, exactly where my own car usually slept. My garage, my sanctuary, bought with 10 years of late nights, skipped vacations, instant noodles, and relentless saving to finally afford a home that was mine. My name on the deed, my name on the bills, my sweat, my sacrifice. And now her car. The clock on my phone reads 6:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I had my morning mapped out like always: coffee, gym, shower, work. A calm, predictable rhythm. But this broke it. The faint echo of heels clicked on the sidewalk outside. Slow, confident. Then she appeared. Karen. She didn't even look surprised to see me standing barefoot in my garage, flannel pajama pants hanging loose, hoodie half-zipped. She gave me that easy, bright smile, the kind only people who have never been told no can wear. "Oh, you're up early," she said, casually hauling a single grocery bag from the back seat of the SUV, like this was all perfectly normal. "Karen," I said flatly. She barely looked back. "Yeah, I just needed to drop a few things at my mom's. Didn't want to block my own driveway. She's having it pressure washed this morning. Hope it's not a problem." And just like that, she walked away. No apology, no explanation. Just ownership. I stood there in the cold breeze of my half-open garage, feeling the sting of something I couldn't quite name. Violation. Disbelief. The first sparks of anger, maybe. Karen. I'd met her only twice before. Once at the neighborhood welcome barbecue, where she introduced herself as the head of the HOA with the kind of pride usually reserved for CEOs or world leaders. And again, 2 weeks later, when she slipped a printed violation notice under my door because my trash bin had been visible from the street for 3 minutes past pickup. That was the Karen I knew. Strict, smug, a ruler of her tiny suburban kingdom. And apparently now a squatter in my garage. I didn't go to the gym that morning. I couldn't. I just stared at the SUV for hours. It stayed until noon, like it belonged there, like some mocking test I hadn't agreed to take. That evening I saw her at the mailbox. I tried, really tried, to keep my voice calm. "Hey, about the garage." "All right," she said brightly, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Thanks for being so chill about it. You're a gem." I blinked. I didn't say it was okay. She just laughed. "Don't worry, my mom and I won't be long. Her place is right across the street anyway." She pointed to the modest white-trimmed ranch diagonally across from mine. Flower beds perfect. Security camera glinting in the afternoon sun. Her mother lived there. A frail-looking but impossibly stylish older woman I'd only ever seen walking a tiny dog in what looked like a designer trench coat. "You can't just park in someone else's garage," I said, firmer now. "Oh, I'm sure we'll figure it out," Karen said, turning away, already done with the conversation. And that was it. Like I didn't exist. Like this wasn't my home. For a while, I convinced myself it was a one-time thing. Some strange, entitled misunderstanding. But a few days later, it happened again. Same SUV, same spot. Like the garage had a new owner I'd never met. I knocked on her mother's door this time. The older woman answered, smiling politely, her silver curls perfectly arranged, blouse crisp, posture straight. She looked like she had never rushed for anything in her life. "Hello, dear. You must be the young man across the street." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you, but is Karen home?" "She's resting. Rough HOA meeting last night," she said softly. I took a breath. "I really need to talk to her. She's parked in my garage again." The woman blinked, tilting her head slightly. "Is that a problem?" My jaw tightened. Yes, it is." She sighed. "She only parked there to drop off some heavy things for me. I'm 80 years old and my back isn't what it used to be. I'm sure you understand." I swallowed hard. "I do, but that doesn't make it okay." Her smile shrank just a little. "Sometimes it's good to be flexible, generous. You're young, fit. Surely you can make room for two ladies who just need a little help now and then." The word stung, though I couldn't quite explain why. I left before I said something I'd regret. That night, I sat in my living room in silence, staring at the darkened garage through the window. I realized something important. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-off favor. Karen thought she owned my space. And worse, she believed I wouldn't fight back. And for the first time, a quiet, stubborn voice in my head whispered back, "She's wrong." Do you know that moment when irritation turns into something sharper? When it's no longer just a neighborly inconvenience, it's a line being crossed. That was me, staring at my garage from the living room window 3 days later. The beige SUV was back. No pressure washing excuse this time. No grocery bag in sight. Just entitlement parked in metal and rubber. I didn't hesitate this time. I marched across the street, heart pounding like a drum. My knuckles hit Karen's door harder than I intended. It swung open, but not to Karen. Her mother. She looked me over with that perfect, unbothered poise. "Hello again, dear." "Hi, is Karen home?" "She's resting," the older woman said, drawing out the word like I was interrupting royalty. "Well, I really need to talk to her. She's parked in my garage again." Her eyes blinked slowly, like she had all the time in the world. "Is that a problem?" I felt my breath catch. "Yes," I said, voice firm now, "it is." She gave a little sigh, a soft, "you'll understand when you're older" kind of sound. "She only parked there to drop off some heavy things for me. I'm 80 years old. My back isn't what it used to be. I'm sure you understand." Oh, I understood. I understood that this wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a test, a way to see how much I'd tolerate. I didn't want to argue with someone's grandmother, but my voice tightened. "I do, but that doesn't make it okay." Her smile flickered, smaller, sharper. "Sometimes it's good to be flexible, generous. You're young, fit. Surely you can make room for two ladies who just need a little help now and then." The words sank like a stone in my gut. I was being cast as the bad guy in my own home. I turned and walked away before I said something that would haunt me. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling a quiet heat burn behind my eyes. I thought about the last decade, long nights at work, skipped trips, sacrificing every small luxury just to buy this house. It wasn't just wood and concrete. It was mine, my safe space, my finish line after years of grinding. And now, I was letting two strangers take pieces of it like it was theirs to claim. The next day, I tried a new strategy. I changed the garage keypad code. A small act of defiance. For 2 glorious days, it worked. The garage stayed empty except for my car. My heart started to unclench. But on the 3rd day, I opened my door to leave for work and froze. There it was. The beige SUV. Sitting exactly where it always did, smug and untouchable. I walked into the garage, scanning the keypad. The code had been changed back. My stomach dropped. When I called the manufacturer, the technician's voice was calm, almost amused. Some models can sync automatically if another remote is programmed within close proximity, he explained. Accidentally, he added. Accidentally. Right. I hung up and stood in the garage, letting the anger seep through me like cold water. This wasn't accidental. This was war. From that day forward, I documented everything. Photos, videos, time-stamped logs. Every smug parking job. Every wave from her mother, like I was the neighborhood entertainment. Every sarcastic note Karen left, including the one she slipped under my door. Neither is the sidewalk where your trash can sat for 12 minutes last Friday. Each piece felt like a brick, and I was slowly building something. Not a wall. A case. Because in the quiet moments, standing in that cold garage, I realized something important. Karen didn't believe rules applied to her. And her mother, she believed her daughter was untouchable. They weren't just neighbors. They were a queen and her advisor on a suburban chessboard. And I was the new pawn they thought they could push around. But the thing about pawns, they can cross the board. And when they do, they change the game. Have you ever felt your own home start to feel foreign? Like the walls are yours, but the air belongs to someone else. That was me standing barefoot in my kitchen at 11 p.m., lights off, staring at the faint glow from my garage window. I couldn't sleep, because even when the SUV wasn't there, I felt it. Like an echo, like a threat. And then things got worse. One Friday evening, I came home later than usual. The sun had dipped low, the streetlights buzzing faintly, the sky painted in that soft, lavender blue that makes everything feel just a little unreal. As I turned onto my street, I saw it. Not one car. Two. The beige SUV and a vintage sedan I didn't recognize, both parked in my driveway. My stomach dropped. Music pulsed faintly from my garage. Light spilled out like an open invitation. And as I stepped closer, I heard it. Laughter. Dancing footsteps on my concrete floor. I walked in and froze. Karen was spinning in the middle of my garage, one hand clutching a half-full wine glass, the other holding a phone that blasted pop music. Her cheeks were flushed, hair loose, eyes gleaming like she owned the night and my home. Against the back wall, her mother sat in a folding chair, sipping from a silver thermos like this was some private club. She tapped her foot to the beat, elegant as ever, as if nothing about this scene was insane. They didn't stop when they saw me. Didn't apologize. Didn't even flinch. What the hell is this? My voice came out sharper than I expected, trembling with disbelief and anger. Karen twirled to a stop and grinned. Oh, relax, it's not like we're breaking anything. You're trespassing, you've been trespassing for weeks. She rolled her eyes and sauntered toward me, her wine sloshing dangerously. You think this is a real problem? There are bigger issues in this neighborhood, buddy. I suggest you pick your battles. I stared at her. At her mother. At the two cars clogging my driveway. Something cold settled into my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked out. And behind me, I heard her mother's voice, soft and dismissive. He'll get over it. But I didn't. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in lazy, taunting circles, I realized something vital. They weren't going to stop. Not because they could, but because they didn't want to. This wasn't carelessness. This was dominance. They were daring me to fight back. And I would. Not with shouting. Not with threats. But with something permanent. The plan didn't arrive all at once. It started as a whisper in my mind, then grew teeth. I began with a list. Dates, times, photos. Clips from my security camera showing the SUV, gliding into my garage like it had a lease. Karen waving. Her mother winking. The night she threw her impromptu wine party, twirling on my concrete floor like it was her stage. Every entry on that list felt like another step toward something bigger. Not just revenge. Resolution. They thought I was soft. They thought I'd roll over. So I made a new list. The title was simple. How to make a queen step off her throne. Step 1, strip the garage. I cleared out everything. Tools, bikes, storage bins. Every scrap of value disappeared into my basement or the shed. Then I scrubbed the floor clean. Not just to prepare, but to send a message. Let her think I was giving up. That I'd retreated into quiet submission. I even left the garage door half open for 2 full days, a perfect bait. And like clockwork, she took it. I watched from my window as the beige SUV rolled in, tires crunching softly on my spotless concrete, like a dog returning to a favorite patch of grass. Perfect. That night after she left, the real work began. I drove to a hardware store on the edge of town and bought 2 industrial tubs of transparent, odorless adhesive. The kind contractors use to bond steel to concrete. Waterproof, weatherproof, viciously permanent. Back home, I pulled out an old tarp and rolled it across the center of the garage floor. Gloves on, trowel in hand, I spread the glue in thick, sticky layers beneath the tarp, forming a perfect rectangle wide enough to catch all 4 tires if she pulled in like she always did. The stuff clung to my gloves like it wanted to keep me there. Perfect. I smoothed the tarp flat and dusted it with a sprinkle of dirt and sawdust. By morning, it would look like any other boring patch of garage floor. And then I waited. The next morning, I mowed my lawn like nothing was different, the sun warm on my neck, the faint smell of glue lingering in my memory like a secret. Every few minutes, my eyes flicked toward her house. At 10:43 a.m., the SUV backed out. Slow, casual. She wore sunglasses, one hand on the wheel, the other lazily draped on the door. She didn't even look around. Didn't hesitate. She aimed for my garage and pulled right in. The tires hit the tarp with a soft, almost satisfying smack. I imagined the glue pressing into the treads, creeping into every groove like a trap snapping shut. She parked, stepped out, and called over her shoulder toward her mother's house. "Garage is all yours, Mom." I clenched my jaw, hiding behind the hedge, barely breathing. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Have you ever felt time slow down, like the world is holding its breath with you? That was me, crouched behind my hedge, watching Karen stroll away from her SUV as if she'd just parked in her private palace. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a dark, quiet thrill. The trap was set. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Finally, I stepped into the garage. The SUV sat perfectly centered on my tarp, innocent and motionless. I crouched by the front tire, heart thumping in my ears. I reached out and touched the edge of the rubber. It was already firming up. The glue had begun to cure, gripping the treads with invisible claws. She was mine. I walked back to my lawn, grabbed a rake, and pretended to do yard work. And for the first time since I'd bought this house, I felt in control. 20 minutes later, the front door across the street opened. Karen stepped out, phone in hand, sipping from a sparkling water bottle like she was on vacation. She strolled to the SUV, sunglasses catching the sun, and smiled when she saw me standing in my driveway. "Oh, come on," she said cheerfully. "You're not still mad, are you?" I said nothing. She slid into the driver's seat, tossed her phone onto the console, and turned the key. The engine purred. She shifted into reverse. The first sound wasn't a tire squeal. It was a deep, sticky groan. The SUV rocked but didn't move. Karen frowned, pressed the gas harder. This time the tires screamed against the cement, a shrill cry that cut through the quiet suburban street. Smoke curled up faintly from under the wheels. The car shivered but stayed rooted in place. I folded my arms. Silent, patient. Karen killed the engine and stepped out, slamming the door. Her sandals slapped against the driveway as she marched around the car, bending low to inspect the tires. "What the hell?" her voice cracked in disbelief. By now, a few curtains twitched. Neighbors peeked from behind blinds, drawn by the sound. A kid across the street paused on his bike, wide-eyed. Karen straightened, face flushing red. She glared at me. You glued my car to the floor." I tilted my head slightly. "Did I?" Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Good," I said calmly. "They'll want to see the footage." She froze, her finger hovering over the screen. "What footage?" I tapped my phone, opening the first clip. Her car, pulling into my garage. Her stepping out. Her walking away, waving toward her mom's house. Swipe. Another clip, her wine party. Her spinning, laughing, flipping off my security camera in the middle of my garage. Her face drained of color. "You've been spying on me," she snapped. "You've been trespassing," I replied, voice flat. For the first time, her mother appeared, crossing the street with deliberate, measured steps. Her tailored slacks and ivory blouse looked untouched by the summer heat, as if she floated above the world. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice as calm as a whispering breeze. "Your daughter's car is stuck," I said. Karen pointed at me, eyes blazing. "He did this, he sabotaged me." Her mother turned her head slowly, studying the scene. And then she looked at me with something almost like respect. "You're playing with fire, young man," she said softly. I smiled faintly. "No, I'm just tired of being trampled." Karen's voice shot up an octave. "This is criminal. He damaged my property." I held up my phone. "Call the police. Let's show them the whole story." 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up, lights off, moving at that slow, casual speed of suburban calls that probably wouldn't make the blotter. The officer stepped out, sunglasses, clipboard, a faint smirk he tried to hide. He took in the scene. One beige SUV. One furious Karen. One calm homeowner. Half the neighborhood peeking from windows. "Whose vehicle?" he asked. "Mine," Karen snapped. "Do you live here?" Karen hesitated. "No, my mom does across the street." The officer turned to me. "Is she allowed to park here?" I shook my head. "Repeated trespassing, I have footage." Karen's voice wavered with indignation. "He trapped me on his property. This is sabotage." The officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. Let's see the footage." I played the clips. The SUV entering the garage. Karen leaving laughing. Her garage party. Her flipping off my camera. The officer watched silently. When it ended, he turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this looks like private property, and you've parked here multiple times without permission. That's trespassing." Her mouth fell open. "But he glued my car to the floor." "Civil issue," the officer said. "You can take it to small claims, but criminally, you're in the wrong here." The words hit her like stones. For the first time, her mother's face faltered. Not with anger, just exhaustion. "Call a tow truck," the officer said. "And I suggest you pay for it." By the time the tow arrived, half the neighborhood had gathered. Phones out. Kids whispering. One neighbor muttered, "It's like the car is crying," as the SUV's tires screeched against the concrete, sticky glue strings snapping like elastic. The tow truck driver shook his head. They ain't paying me enough for this. But slowly, painfully, the SUV was lifted, dragged, and rolled away, leaving behind a jagged patch of rubber and hardened glue on my garage floor. Karen stood in the street, arms crossed, humiliated. Her mother said nothing. The officer drove away. And for the first time in months, I felt like the board had shifted. Have you ever heard silence that feels dangerous? Not peaceful, not calm, dangerous. That was the silence in my neighborhood after the tow truck rumbled away, leaving only a trail of shredded rubber and beige glue across my driveway. Karen didn't scream. She didn't rant. She didn't throw a wine-fueled tantrum. She went quiet. For 3 straight days, she didn't speak to me. Not in passing. Not at the mailbox. Not even when we both dragged our trash cans to the curb like dueling soldiers. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was the pause before the storm. The kind of stillness that makes birds fly away early and dogs pace for no reason. And sure enough, the hammer fell on a Thursday morning. I opened my mailbox and froze. Inside was an envelope. Heavy paper. No return address. I opened it on the spot. Inside was a letter formatted to look official, like something a lawyer might send if a lawyer had a sense of humor. Suburban Property Integrity Group. The words were stamped in bold at the top. I almost laughed. It wasn't a real agency. Karen had invented her own. The letter accused me of intentional damage to personal property, community disruption, failure to comply with neighborly standards. It threatened legal consequences and financial restitution. At the bottom, in a flourish of dramatic penmanship, was one single word. Karen. I stood in my driveway, the morning sun warming my face, and let out a dry, humorless laugh. I could see her in my mind, sitting at her kitchen table, wine glass in hand, typing this with her mother proofreading over her shoulder. 2 self-appointed queens in their suburban castle, believing they were untouchable. I thought about tearing it up and tossing it in the bin. But no, this wasn't over. I needed to be smarter than that. Cleaner. So I went back inside, opened my laptop, and began compiling everything. The list I'd been keeping turned into a digital war chest. Video logs of every trespass. Time-stamped photos of her car parked in my garage. Screenshots of the HOA emails and her sarcastic notes. Clips of her wine-fueled garage party. Footage of her car being towed, humiliated, with neighbors recording. Each file was another nail in the coffin she didn't even know she'd built for herself. But I wasn't finished. I took it all to a lawyer. Not some flashy courtroom shark. Just a sharp, quiet man in a small office who had the kind of confidence that only comes from being impossible to surprise. He flipped through the files with an expressionless face. 10 minutes in, he smirked. "This," he said, "is a lawsuit waiting to backfire." I blinked. Meaning, if she sues you, she's digging her own grave. She'll have to prove damages without admitting she was repeatedly trespassing. Judges don't like that. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. Because finally, I wasn't just reacting. I was ahead. A week later, it happened. A formal summons landed in my mailbox. Karen had filed in small claims court. My court date was 2 weeks away. I almost laughed out loud right there on the porch. After all this, she was really going to waltz into a courtroom and try to play the victim. But then I realized what this meant. The game had changed. We weren't just playing HOA chess anymore. We were stepping into the real arena, one with judges and records and rulings that last forever. For the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood felt electric. People were watching. Neighbors I barely knew lingered longer at the mailbox. Kids whispered on bikes when they passed my driveway. Karen kept her distance. But her mother, she watched. From her porch. From her window. Sometimes just standing at the edge of her lawn with her tiny dog, silent as a statue, her silver hair glinting in the sun. It felt like a standoff from an old western. But instead of guns, we had paperwork. The day of the hearing arrived like a thunderhead rolling in, dark, inevitable, humming with tension. I wore a simple navy suit. Karen arrived in a floral blouse that seemed one size too small, heels clicking like she was walking a red carpet to vindication. Her mother followed behind her, elegant as ever in an ivory coat, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes. She moved like someone who had already rehearsed the whole scene in her head. The courtroom was quiet, sterile. A judge with sharp eyes and a sharper tone called the case. Karen went first. She spoke quickly, dramatically, her voice rising and falling in waves of practiced indignation. She talked about emotional trauma, vehicular cruelty, and community betrayal. She painted herself and her mother as the innocent victims of a vindictive new neighbor with anger issues. At least twice she pointed directly at me, her finger trembling with rage. The judge listened, expressionless. When Karen was done, she handed over a stack of printed color photos. Every page had arrows and circles, like she'd made them in PowerPoint at 2 a.m. The judge turned to me. Your response? I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. I submitted the log, the emails, the HOA notes, the sarcastic letters, the videos, including the one where Karen twirled in my garage with a wine glass in one hand and her middle finger raised proudly at my camera. The courtroom was silent when the last clip ended. Even the judge took a moment, removing her glasses slowly. Then she looked at Karen. Miss Karen, she said, her voice dry enough to crack marble. You parked on this man's property multiple times without permission. You hosted a social event in his garage without permission. And you are accusing him of sabotage. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. The judge leaned back. You are lucky this is small claims. Otherwise, I might be reading you your rights. Karen turned to her mother, searching for backup. But the older woman sat still, unmoved, silent. The judge looked at me. You're within your rights to seek damages as well. I shook my head. I don't want money, I just want peace. There was a long pause. Then the gavel fell. Case dismissed with prejudice. Karen stormed out of that courtroom before the echo of the gavel even faded. Her mother followed, quiet as ever, only pausing beside me long enough to whisper. You could have buried her. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I already had. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes after a battle. Not the soft quiet of peace. The hollow quiet of a kingdom that's just lost its queen. That was my street in the days after the courtroom. Karen's SUV, scratched, scarred, humiliated, was gone. The driveway across the street sat empty for the first time since I'd moved in. Even the tiny dog her mother walked every morning seemed to move slower, ears flicking in confusion at the new rhythm of our neighborhood. At first, I didn't believe it would last. I expected another letter, another knock on my door, another smirk in my garage. But instead, there was nothing. Not a word, not a glance, not even a sarcastic wave from her mother. It was like someone had pressed mute on the constant, grinding irritation that had been my life for months. I should have been relieved. And I was. But beneath that relief was curiosity. Because silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means plotting. A week later, I got my answer. A notice slid under my door, Not from the court this time, but from the HOA board. Emergency meeting. I almost laughed. Because I already knew. When I walked into the clubhouse that night, the air was different. Lighter. Charged with something I hadn't felt in months. Possibility. Half the neighborhood showed up. Some sat stiffly in their folding chairs. Others leaned back with the kind of smirks people wear when they've been waiting for justice to finally catch up. And there she was. Karen. No floral blouse this time. No smile. Her hair was pulled tight, her jaw tighter. She sat at the front of the room, a single folder clutched in her lap like it could shield her from the stares. Her mother wasn't there. The HOA president, Karen, cleared her throat. Well, let's get started. But someone else spoke first. A man in the back. Actually, he said, maybe we should start with the incident last week, the court case. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's shoulders stiffened. That matter is private, she said sharply. It's public record now, someone else called out. And frankly, I think the community deserves to know if our president is trespassing on other people's property and losing in court. Karen's face went red. I was trying to help my mother. This is all being blown way out of. The room erupted. Not with yelling. With laughter. Quiet at first, then louder. And in that moment I realized I didn't have to lift a finger. Karen had finally done what I couldn't. She'd embarrassed herself enough for everyone to see who she really was. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to suspend her as president pending review. 2 weeks later, she resigned. Just like that, the queen was gone. The changes were immediate. Without Karen's iron grip, the neighborhood began to breathe. Lawns grew greener. Driveways cleared. People waved more. Someone even started a community garden in the empty lot near the cul-de-sac. The strangest part, I started to enjoy living there again. The first weekend after Karen's resignation, I hosted a barbecue. A real one. No HOA agenda. No side eyes. Just meat sizzling on the grill and music drifting through the warm evening air. Half the cul-de-sac showed up. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to brought salads, chips, and a couple of bottles of wine. An older guy dragged over a karaoke machine, and by sunset, someone was belting out Sweet Caroline while kids ran through sprinklers. I stood at the grill, spatula in hand, watching people laugh where they used to whisper. Even the tiny dog ran free, chasing bubbles and kids instead of tension. And for the first time since I'd signed the mortgage papers, I felt like I lived in a neighborhood, not a battlefield. That night, after everyone left, I walked out to the driveway alone. The summer air buzzed softly with cicadas. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked to life. My garage door was wide open. The floor, finally clean and smooth, reflected the glow of the porch light. No cars. No trespassers. No battles to fight. I took a long sip from a cold beer and sat on the tailgate of my truck, letting the silence sink in. And then I noticed something. Near the edge of the driveway, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right, was a thin trail of dried beige glue. A scar from the battle I'd fought. Permanent. I knelt down and ran my finger over it. Rough. Unmoving. A quiet reminder that sometimes you don't need to keep fighting the same battle forever. Because if you do it right, you only have to win once. Do you know what victory feels like in the suburbs? It's not fireworks. It's not confetti. It's silence. Not the heavy silence of tension, but the soft, gentle quiet of a street that has finally exhaled. For weeks after Karen's resignation, that's what my neighborhood sounded like. Peace. The beige SUV never returned. The HOA meetings went from hostile ambushes to boring discussions about flower beds and recycling schedules. And for the first time, I could open my garage in the morning without feeling a knot in my chest. But then something unexpected happened. One morning, I stepped out to grab the paper and saw her. Karen's mother. She was standing at the edge of her lawn, tiny dog in one hand, a cream-colored envelope in the other. The early sunlight caught her silver curls, and for a moment, she didn't look like the imperious matriarch I'd come to know. She looked tired. We locked eyes across the street. No words. No smirk. Just acknowledgement. Then she crossed the road, slow, deliberate steps, like she was measuring each one. She stopped at my driveway and extended the envelope. "Here," she said softly. I hesitated, then took it. She didn't wait for me to open it. She just gave a faint nod, turned, and walked back toward her house. I opened it right there in the driveway. Inside was a single piece of cream stationery. No envelope lining. No flourish. Just a note written in careful, elegant script. "Thank you. Maybe now she'll finally grow up. I'm going to stay with my sister in Maine. You've earned your quiet." I read it twice, then a third time. And against my better judgment, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Because beneath all the irritation, the games, the trespassing, the glue, there was a mother who had spent months defending her daughter's worst habits. And somewhere inside, maybe, she was just as exhausted as I was. Over the next few days, I watched her prepare to leave. One by one, lights in her house went dark. The tiny dog disappeared from the morning routine. And then on a Tuesday afternoon, a taxi pulled up and she loaded 2 small suitcases into the trunk. She paused at the curb, looking back at her house for a long moment. Then she got in and drove away. And just like that, the last piece of Karen's shadow left the neighborhood. Life began to bloom. I planted flowers along the driveway where the glue had once hardened like armor. Neighbors stopped by more often, dropping off small gifts, sharing stories about how long they'd secretly wanted someone to stand up to Karen. One older man, watering his roses, chuckled when I walked past. "You know," he said, "I've lived here 25 years, never seen anyone handle her like that." I shrugged. I didn't want to handle her, I just wanted peace. He nodded, smiling. Funny thing about peace, sometimes you have to earn it first. And I had earned it. Weeks later, on a warm summer night, I hosted another small barbecue. No HOA rules. No fear of wine-fueled invasions. Just laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of burgers and charcoal in the air. Half the cul-de-sac showed up again. Kids ran through sprinklers. A neighbor set up a projector for an impromptu outdoor movie. And in the fading sunlight, someone handed me a beer and said, "Feels like a different neighborhood now, huh?" I looked around. At the green lawns. The smiling faces. The open garages free of trespassing SUVs. And I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "It finally feels like home." But even as joy returned, I never forgot the lesson buried in those months of chaos. People will take and take and take. If you let them. And sometimes, standing up for yourself doesn't mean shouting the loudest. Sometimes it means waiting, planning, and letting the truth speak louder than anger ever could. I didn't just reclaim my garage. I reclaimed my peace. And in the quiet hum of a suburban summer night, that felt like the greatest victory of all. They say every scar tells a story. Some are written on skin. Some are written on concrete. Months after the battle ended, on a quiet summer evening, I found myself standing in my driveway again. The barbecue had ended hours ago. The laughter of neighbors had faded. Sprinklers whispered across the street. And there I was, beer in hand, staring at a faint, jagged trail of beige glue still clinging to the edge of my garage floor. Almost invisible, but I knew it was there. I crouched down and ran my fingers over it. Rough, cold, permanent. It was the last remnant of a war no one else would ever see. A quiet suburban war fought not with fists, but with patience, proof, and one perfectly timed plan. I leaned back against my truck and let the summer air wash over me. Because the truth is, winning didn't feel like gloating. It didn't feel like payback. It felt like release. Life moved on. The neighborhood transformed. The tension that once hummed under every mailbox conversation had evaporated. We were just neighbors again. Someone started painting birdhouses and hanging them on trees. A couple down the street planted tomatoes and left baskets of them on porches. Dogs barked only when chasing squirrels, not because they sensed the storm across the street. My home, the place I'd worked a decade to afford, finally felt like what I'd imagined on the day I signed the papers. A safe space. A personal victory. Mine. But every now and then, I'd think about Karen. Where she went. Whether she ever learned. The truth. I didn't care much. Because some people live their whole lives expecting the world to bend for them. Some never learn until the world says no, in a language they can't ignore. And for Karen, that language had been glue, a tow truck, and a courtroom gavel. I didn't hate her. I didn't need to. Because the real win wasn't the humiliation, or the legal victory, or the resigned HOA letter that stripped her of her crown. The real win was this. I never had to fight that battle again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and lavender, I grabbed a piece of chalk from the garage. I knelt down on the smooth concrete floor, my floor, and traced a little square in the corner. Just a small mark. A reminders. Because sometimes in life, the battles that feel endless end quietly. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. Just with the simple, unshakable truth. This is mine. And as the cicadas sang, the street lamps blinked to life, and a soft breeze carried the smell of summer lawns, I realized something I wish I'd known months earlier. Peace isn't always given. Sometimes you have to claim it. And when you finally do, you don't just win the fight. You win your freedom. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one.